Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Robert with my co-host, Sports Radio 610, Shaun Bijani. Later in the show, our takes on the Rockets' early preseason. But joining us now to preview the Texans-Saints game Sunday is David Grubb, the host of the Bleav and Saints podcast, part of the Bleav network. And thanks so much for giving us a few minutes, David.
Glad to talk to you guys.
Hey, David, the Saints beat up on the Patriots 34-0. What part of that was a Saints step forward and what part was just New England being a bad football team?
Well, I think the step forward was that they scored. They haven't put up 34 points, that many points since 15 games. And it's been a pretty consistent problem throughout Dennis Allen's career. He's never had a team average 21 points for a season. So them getting to 34 points was a minor miracle when we kind of think about the Saints and what the offense has been since Dennis Allen took over. So the fact that they ran the ball more than 30 times, something they have not really done well this season, was also encouraging. But overall, it felt more like a game where the Saints did what they were supposed to do against a really bad team on the road rather than the ship is corrected.
David, let's stick with the Saints offense for a second, because I had a chance to catch up with Texans defensive coordinator Matt Burke earlier today, and we were asking him a lot about what the Falcons showed their defense last weekend offensively, and he said, look, they did a little bit more pre-snap motion, showed us some different looks that we hadn't observed on tape. What have you observed from the Saints through the first 5 weeks in terms of what they're starting to do offensively, how comfortable Carr is in that system? And from a pre-snap motion standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're amongst the very top of teams in the league right now that are showing a lot of that window dressing.
Finally, they kind of really amped it up last week. At the beginning of the season, there was a lot of criticism that the offense wasn't doing enough to make the defense adjust. That was a big criticism of Pete Carmichael. We saw a lot more motion against the Patriots, but the offense still hasn't been productive. I mean, quite frankly, Derek Carr has been less than impressive. You go through 5 games and we're looking at 4 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions. The completion percentage is decent, but it's been a lot of checkdowns. We didn't have Alvin Kamara to start the first 3 games of the season. He's been back the last 2. He's one of the most versatile backs in the league when he's really going well. He ran the ball 20 times for 80 yards last week, but 3 catches for 13 yards. That's not going to cut it. And in 2 weeks, he's got 16 catches for 50 yards. So, he's averaging 3 yards a catch. That's not enough. The outside receivers have not gotten a lot of catches as of late. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, 6 total catches the last 2 weeks. So this offense still has a long way to go. The tight ends haven't really gotten involved yet. There's just a lot of work to be done there. So I think the Falcons at least have a little bit more of an identity. They knew what they wanted to be coming into the season. The Saints are still trying to figure theirs out, and it's been difficult.
You're in year 2 of head coach Dennis Allen. What's been the good and the bad for him so far?
The best thing has certainly been the defensive consistency. Since Dennis Allen reassumed the duties as defensive coordinator and now as the head coach, the Saints have been one of the better defensive teams in the league. Last year, they weren't as great yardage-wise, but they were still top 10 in points allowed. They're right there again this year as a team that does not give up a lot of points. They occasionally have trouble getting off the field on third downs, but other than that, that's been the thing that's held this team together, is the quality of the defense. The biggest problem for him has been he has not really had a message that's resonated offensively. He's not really grown into the role of the head coach yet. I think if you compared him to another Sean Payton assistant, there's not a great, big, long tree for Sean Payton. But if you look at a guy like Dan Campbell, who spent some good years as the tight ends coach in New Orleans, the thing that he talks about that he took from Sean was the willingness to go for stuff. When your gut says go for it, do it. And sometimes that backfires for him. The criticism, I think the main criticism for Dennis Allen would be that he never really goes with his gut, that he's overly conservative, that he rarely takes chances. And I think that with an explosive skill position set of players that the Saints have, I think that has hurt them.
Well, it's kind of polar opposites, to some regard, the way you're describing Dennis Allen and the defense compared to DeMeco Ryans and the Texans defense. Certainly from a structural standpoint, and mentality. But sticking with the defense a little bit, David, if we can, a lot of people I think around Houston are a little concerned with what the Falcons took away from the Texans offense this past weekend. The two safeties showing the shelves over the top, putting an extra man into coverage, not bringing a lot of rush, particularly on third downs. And since the Saints have struggled to get off the field on third downs, as you said, what's kind of the conversation around the Saints this week in terms of how confident or not confident they may be in facing a Texans offense, in particular a quarterback like C.J. Stroud, who's playing pretty well?
The thing for the Saints is always stop the run first. When they dominate at the point of attack on the line of scrimmage, they make it much harder for opponents because they do have cornerback wise. I think the Saints have one of the best set of three corners in the league, and Alontae Taylor is really growing into his role. Tyrann Mathieu, who Texans fans are certainly familiar with from his brief stay with them, he's been allowed to make more plays this year. That's his strength. We know coverage is not really his strength. He's much more of a guy who goes by instinct. The Saints do miss Marcus May, who is still serving. This will be the third week of his suspension. So the third and final week of his suspension. So that is an area of concern that maybe you can test them downfield. You saw at the end of the Packers game, the Patriots obviously are an offensive mess, but you saw at the end of the Packers game, go back to that fourth quarter where the Saints gave up that lead and lost the game there, 18 points in the fourth quarter. They were giving up chunk plays through the air. So when the Saints rush doesn't get home, and they've been heavily reliant on Carl Granderson in particular to get there, you do have opportunities to get over the top with the Saints and make big plays. That's been their biggest weakness. And I think, again, if you can get into space, you can challenge their linebackers. Demario Davis, as good as he is, and he's one of the top-rated linebackers in the NFL, but he's a little bit slower at 36 than he was 3 years ago at 33. Pete Werner is an undersized linebacker, makes tackles. You won't get past him, but he has a tendency because of his size to hit guys 2 or 3 yards past the line of scrimmage. So that'll be the big thing for the Saints is really that front four and how well they control the line of scrimmage.
Real quick, if I can, Robert, I just wanted to follow up on that with you, David, because I think it's so interesting. I think we're in store for a hell of a game on Sunday between these two teams. Just listening to you talk and reading what I have the last couple of days leading into this game, the first pass that the Texans threw down the field, if you will, was that touchdown strike from Stroud to Schultz late in the fourth quarter. That was one pass the entire game that they'd attempted more than 20 yards down the field. And that's been a little criticism from Bobby Slowick, or for Bobby Slowick, rather, their offensive coordinator, is that he hadn't really shown a willingness to go down the field, particularly in that Falcons game. He's been very measured, very calculated. Do you think there's an opportunity there for the Texans and C.J. Stroud to kind of strike and take advantage of a Saints secondary and lack of a pass rush?
Yeah, I mean, the last time these teams played what was in New Orleans season opener a couple years ago, the Texans were able to make some plays there, getting downfield. And also Deshaun Watson was able to run and get outside of the pocket. C.J. Stroud is certainly capable of doing that. And the Saints at times have struggled against mobile quarterbacks who can get on the edge. And I think that if the Texans take shots, set them up, you can take advantage, because the other part is Marshawn Lattimore, for as talented as he is, and talent-wise, he's one of the top corners in the NFL. He can take games off when he's not impressed by the guy who's opposite him. So if he doesn't feel challenged by the other receiver, he may not give 100%. So the Saints defense, as good as it is, there are ways to attack it. In week 1 against the Titans, I was surprised that the Saints gave up on that the Titans gave up on the run as quickly as they did, because they did get some big chunk plays in the first half. You can physically wear this team down. It's not the biggest defense, but teams that they've played have not really been suited to do that as of yet.
You surprised that the Saints are a 1.5 favorite right now?
The only reason they are is because they have a winning record. The Saints have been a 50-50 team basically by the odds makers all season long. They've not been more than a 3-point favorite in any game, and they were underdogs last week going into New England. So at this point, I'm firmly in the camp that from week to week, the Saints are a 50-50 proposition until they show and demonstrate that they can score points consistently. Last week does not feel like, hey, we're going to see a string of 30-point games. I don't feel that way yet. you know how the NFL is. If you're not scoring 24 points consistently in this league, you don't really have a chance of being a contender. And they have not done that yet.
Momentum's a hell of a thing. I do know that. Putting up 34 on the Patriots, you can kind of look at it as like, hey, you know what? The Saints did what they were supposed to do. And then putting up that 0 defensively, hey, the Saints did what they were supposed to do. Let's build on that. And I think looking back at that Texans-Falcons game, the Saints should probably feel pretty good about it. I'm kind of perplexed, though, because I don't know what to think. You put a gun to my head, I think this is going to be a battle on Sunday between these two teams. But going back, I don't know if you guys had an opportunity to listen to Dan Orlovsky in his breakdown of the top 5 teams in the NFL. It was earlier today. And the Saints weren't a part of it. And he caught all kinds of hell. And he did a pretty solid job of defending his case, but he wanted to put the Saints up there, right behind, the Chiefs, the Lions, the 49ers, Dallas Cowboys he had ahead of the Saints. And he was like, hey, man, the Saints are probably right there in that tier 2 argument just based on what they can become. And I think they have the pieces. You mentioned Chris Olave. I asked Matt Burke earlier today about Chris Olave and how dangerous could he be? And he was like, he's probably the most dangerous player that they have. Do you see it that way? Do you feel like he's right there on the precipice of helping this offense kind of go to the next level?
Yeah, he's got legitimate, receiver 1 talent and top 10 receiver ability in this league. I think he's having a difficult time adjusting to not being the guy because Michael Thomas is back now. Last year, it was his show. There was no one really else to throw to in that offense other than him. And this year, teams are certainly playing him differently. Derek Carr learning this offense, incorporating new guys, the offensive line struggles, all those things. He's been kind of frustrated. You've seen it on his face and in his body language the last couple of weeks. Alvin Kamara was frustrated. So, yeah, I think the Saints, the best part for them is down the road. And they're very fortunate that they've had the schedule that they've had early in the season because they've gotten to go up against a number of rebuilding teams and younger quarterbacks. So, yeah, they're not at their best now. If they stay healthy, they solve this offensive line problem. They're probably a top 5 team in the NFC, but they're definitely a cut below when you're talking San Francisco, Detroit. Maybe we're talking about Dallas. The Eagles, obviously, and maybe Dallas too. But I think they're a cut below that group.
We are familiar with the Carr family here in Houston. Derek played high school ball in Houston. His brother obviously was the Texans' first quarterback. What was the fans' reaction and your reaction when the Saints went after Derek Carr? Because, you feel like with some of these quarterbacks, you get in that quarterback hell to where you got a median quarterback and you either are a medium team or you can't draft that quarterback that takes you to the next level.
That's where I fell. Because quite frankly, I feel like the Saints they made a mistake in not having an exit plan for Drew Brees by trying to keep that offense the same as the defense was ascending. I felt they needed more of a team that was more physical, get back to a ground attack and use Drew more judiciously, kind of like the way the Broncos did with Peyton Manning, at the end of his career. Rely on your defense, make us enough plays to win games. Jameis obviously didn't work out due to injury and some other things. And there was some, certainly it feels like there's some philosophical conflict between him and Dennis Allen. You bring in Derek Carr, who has only had a top 10 offense twice in his career as far as points go. So with 3 different offensive coordinators, I don't put a lot of stock in Pro Bowls anymore. And I think you guys would probably feel the same. Everybody gets to the Pro Bowl because nobody goes to the Pro Bowl anymore. So I don't really put a lot of stock in those. And we've seen times with the Raiders that they're not significantly worse without Derek Carr. They're not significantly different without Derek Carr. I feel he is a middle-of-the-road quarterback. And you look at what the type of quarterback talent that's been available in the draft, not only last year, but what's going to be available this year, the Saints would have been in a much better position, I think, this season being a 4-13 team in that type of range and getting that quarterback of the future, a Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, whomever, we're talking about Michael Penix, whomever, and you could have your guy in place because you missed out on Patrick Mahomes, who they wanted to get. You missed out on a couple of other guys that the Saints really had targets on in the past. I don't think that you can keep doing that, and I don't see Derek Carr as the kind of quarterback who's going to win you a Super Bowl past the age of 30. Most of your quarterbacks who win before the age of 30, not after. And I don't see him having the type of, Rich Gannon trajectory, late career surge to where he becomes all pro. I just don't see that in Derek Carr. I think we know what he is. He's an okay quarterback. And when the pressure gets to him, we know he can start checking down. And for the last 4 years in a row, his air yards per attempt and his yards per attempt have all gone down.
David, it's interesting. Again, I think this is the spread is correct. What is it? Point and a half going in to Sunday. And we've talked about things that the Texans and Saints, were kind of polar opposites in. I think red zone is another area where the Saints offensively, they're pretty middling, maybe bottom of the league in terms of success with the red zone. Texans are the same way. What do you think ultimately this game on Sunday comes down to? What's the difference maker here? Win, lose, or
it's going to be turnovers. The Saints have been getting turnovers the last few weeks. Obviously, CJ Stroud hasn't thrown a pick yet, but he has a couple of fumbles. So last week there were a couple of balls I think that PFF talked about that should have been picked off. The Saints have been relying on those turnovers to set them up with shorter fields. They got a touchdown off a Tyrann Mathieu pick last week. They've needed those turnovers. Winning the turnover battle has been huge for them because of their inability to sustain drives. And then I think also you look at the kicking game. Blake Grupe, as a rookie, he's only missed one kick so far this season and has already made a number of kicks from beyond 50. So if this does come down to a one-possession game, the Saints do feel confident in their field goal kicker. Punting game, not so much. That's been a mixed bag, but I think the Saints feel very confident in their field goal kicker. And then, I think turnovers are going to be if they can get an interception, that changes everything, I think, mentally for CJ Stroud. Because until you get that first one in the NFL, you know what I mean? Like you can live a little dangerously, but it's coming. As a rookie, it's coming. They're going to get it eventually. And I think that if the Saints get one early, it could really change the tone of the game.
I think it's a good observation. I'd forgotten the Saints, I think, are amongst the leaders in the league with turnovers created at 9, 7 interceptions.
7 interceptions so far.
Yeah, they've been opportunistic, and it might be perfect storm. I don't know. Some people around here just want CJ to get the interception over with, throw the damn thing already. But I am not in that group. As clean as you could stay for as long as possible, that's the thing. But we were just talking about taking shots down the field. It feels like Bobby Slowick could very well do that just in an effort for nothing else to try and open up the run game for the Texans, which has struggled mightily.
You don't want to abandon the run game against the Saints. Don't make it one-dimensional if you're trying to beat them. I mean, that you're just making it much easier. You look at a guy like Cam Jordan, backside of his career, DeMar Davis, again, the Saints were able to limit New England to 51 plays last week. That's an incredibly low number for an NFL game. If they get into that upper 60s, 70s range, it's a much different ball game. So I think you don't want to abandon the run if you're playing against them, and you want to extend your drives. But take some shots, because I think the safeties position is a place where the Saints could, be vulnerable.
Would be very shocked if this game wasn't a close game. But that could be the recipe that what Shaun was talking about with the interceptions. It could be a recipe for Stroud's first INT this year. We'll see what happens with that. But just remind people before you go about your show and how to connect with you on social media. And even in case some of the Texans fans want to reach out to you, maybe ask a question or something.
Yeah, you can check Bleav in Saints wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube on the Bleav Network. And you can also find me at DM Grubb on X and Instagram. And you can also check on WBOK 12:30 a.m. in New Orleans 4 days a week.
Awesome. That's great stuff. Great stuff, man. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the game. And I think it's just going to be crazy in Houston this weekend. The interstate baseball game, ALCS starting up on Sunday as well.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of my childhood at the Astrodome watching those teams. And so definitely excited about this series as well.
It's going to be great.
Absolutely.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Thanks guys, for having me.
All right. Good stuff.
Yeah, fantastic stuff from David. And before we hit the Rockets, Shaun, a couple of quick Texans notes. I want to get just your reaction a little bit. Josh Jones back on full participation. Is there any chance Tytus goes back to right tackle and Jones plays left guard this week?
You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say zero chance this week. I started to say small percentage because I think it's largely contingent on Juice Scruggs whenever he makes his way back, and he's just not been seen on a practice field, even in the locker room, not since early last week. When I did see him last week, it seemed like he was moving around okay, in good spirits, but we just haven't seen him on the practice field, and I think it's largely contingent on his return. And I say that because he played a little left guard during training camp. The Texans obviously need one, and they feel like Fant's done a serviceable enough job at right tackle that they need a dude that at least has some experience and, can move people with an injured hand, albeit, in Tytus Howard still, like, it's not 100% right, but at least he has some help on the interior, and he has some help on his left-hand side, which is Laramie Tunsil, who is back at practice today. So I think they're just going to roll with that as long as Laramie's healthy, and I think they're load managing him as best they possibly can. He practiced today. We'll see what happens tomorrow. It's Friday, so it's an important day for him, but it's probably going to be Tunsil, Howard, Patterson, Mason, and Fant going into the Saints game. If anything changes, I wouldn't anticipate it until next week.
I asked the question because the Texans can't run the football, and I don't know what your feeling is. Is Tytus better as a run blocking right tackle than George Fant? Because the guard, it's not good any way you go. Josh Jones, Tytus Howard, what you got right now is not good. You're kind of waiting for Scruggs to come back, maybe move Patterson over to left guard, maybe, have Scruggs play left guard. So what do you think? Is Tytus a better run blocking right tackle?
Well, I think it's a good question. I'm so glad you asked because it's really difficult to say. If you have any opinion on it whatsoever, you'd have to go back to the preseason before Tytus broke his hand. And I don't even know if did the Texans get a chance to play a preseason game before Tytus broke his hand? They might have played one. And I say that because, look, a couple of different things here. Tytus Howard, yeah, he's played left guard before and it didn't go so well back in 2020, 21, whatever it was, right? Had a run blocking grade of like 45 then, had a run blocking grade of 54 this past week, depending on how much stock you put into Pro Football Focus and their grades. I mean, I think just going by the eye test and that grade is probably pretty accurate, but George Fant as a run blocker, it's bad, man. I don't like it. I don't know what his grade was. I think it might have been 60 if I'm remembering correctly, but I think that's even a little more favorable than I would have given him. I went back and I looked. Granted, I just looked at the first half against the Falcons game, and I only looked at the plays that stood out to me in terms of what I felt should have ended in a better result. So basically, I took out the best plays, and I only looked at the bad ones. And that was anything from the Tank Dell little end around jet sweep kind of things, the 6-yard loss, the 5-yard loss, Damian Pierce, no gain, stuff like that, all from the first half. And ultimately what it comes down to is not really the movement at all from anyone on the offensive line, but it's just sticking with your blocks and then knowing who to go key on. And I noticed a few things. Fant getting blown up on a couple of them. One, not even engaging, and that just told me that he didn't know who to take. He didn't know who to block in that instance, and it was a bunch trips right set with 2 tight ends and a slot receiver, your wide out, and a bunch set. He didn't know who to block. Another one was with Beck in there, and the Texans presumably were asking Tank Dell, who at the time was lined up in the slot in the bunch set, to go key on a middle linebacker. And Beck was supposed to get the safety. It's a hard ask for anybody, never mind somebody that's 5'8", 165 pounds, to go key on a middle linebacker and crash down on them. But that, according to the play design and what I watched about 10 times at nauseum before.
Well, you said Beck, you meant Tank, right? Tank was supposed to get him. You said
no. Beck. Tank was supposed to get him.
Yeah. You said Beck.
Beck was there too. There was 2 guys to get. According to the play design, you go back and watch, Tank was supposed to get the mic, and Beck was supposed to climb up and get the safety. That's what happened. Tank went and got the mic. Beck climbed up and tried to get the safety, which he didn't because he stumbled. It should have been Tank getting the safety and Beck getting the mic. That didn't happen. So they were not on the same page on that play. And so when you talk about this run game, it really comes down to executing their blocks and knowing who to key on. I don't think it's Dameon Pierce. Granted, it's just the first half. And even that last series, Texans wouldn't have had an opportunity if it wasn't for Dameon Pierce getting some hard fought yardage. But I just think ultimately it's a conglomeration of a lot of things. Maybe the line, maybe the blocking, maybe the assignments, maybe they're keying in on wrong guys. And look, Pierce even missed one too, where he'd press the right edge and should have cut it back. Didn't, stayed committed to it, and got stuffed for a no gain. That tells me that he's just not seeing the whole field. He's not understanding where guys are. He's maybe not understanding who's going to be blocked, who's supposed to be blocked, who is being blocked.
All right, let's go a little under the radar good thing from the Texans. And let's go to a friend of the show, former guest, Blake Cashman. He has a 91.1 Pro Football Focus grade. Shaun, he's the highest graded linebacker in the NFL right now.
Yeah, you know why? Because he's been a part of some big time plays. It's not because, he's doing an excellent job every single time of stuff in the run. It's not because he's perfect in coverage. He's been pretty good in coverage. He's probably their best coverage linebacker, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, he's done a
but
fantastic job.
he's like he's in the right spot at the right time. He's recovered a fumble. I think he helped create a fumble. He got an interception. It's those swinging type plays that are going to earn you those grades. And hey, ultimately, I'm not going to crush the guy for it. Knock on wood, dude's been healthy as he's been to play linebacker in this league since his rookie season with the Jets. That's huge because once upon a time ago, Blake Cashman, just another dude playing for the New York Jets, he was actually pretty good in that Robert Salas system. And so having that familiarity in that sort of defense, now playing with D'Amico, understanding the kind of mentality and what they're asking their linebackers to do, the demands, he's familiar with it. He's in the right spot. He's a playmaker. He's a dude. When he's healthy, we've seen it, special team ace under Frank Ross for the last couple of years. And so it's not surprising to me to see this dude balling out. It's just, boy, can he keep it up? Because he's had all kinds of injury issues, soft tissue mainly, throughout the course of his career. He's off to a terrific start.
All right, I was going to ask you final thoughts on the Texans, but you know what? I'm just too excited, Shaun, to talk about my Houston Rockets, who, man, it was fun to get a first glimpse of them this year.
Yeah.
I know the headline was Villain Brooks doing this Villain Brooks things and getting kicked out for a groin punch. But let me just say, for the first time in 3 years, I saw a very organized basketball team, both ends of the court, defensive rotations, effort was legit. No standing around looking lost on offense. No nonstop dribbling by one guy while everybody else looks lost out on the court.
Yeah.
What did you see, Shaun?
The key word was discipline, to be quite honest with you. That's what I noticed. Look, they took care of the basketball well. They shot the ball well. They hustled, getting back to the other end of the court to prevent easy baskets. Although that first one, I think after their first 2 points, I forget who dunked that basketball, but it was like in the blink of an eye, bam, the Pacers were down at the other end and they got an easy one too. After that, it was just kind of like, all right, they settled in. Maybe the nerves, went away a lot for these younger guys, particularly. I like the brand of basketball that I saw. I got to be honest with you. I tuned out for like 5 minutes after Dylan Brooks got freaking tossed 4.5 minutes into the game. I was so mad that they tossed him for that. Yeah, it was on purpose, but I mean, I've seen way more egregious punches to the junk than what Dylan Brooks gave old Knucklehead. And it's a preseason game, 4.5 minutes in, let him play. If he's not Dylan Brooks, he stays in. It's a flagrant one. But because he's Dylan Brooks, they kicked him out. So I tuned out for about 5 minutes, but then I was locked in, man. I heard the crowd getting rowdy in the background on the TV, and I love what I'm seeing. Fred VanVleet, I don't know if you could have done better on the market this offseason than bringing that guy in to run the show at point. I love the shot selection from him. I love how the Rockets opened up opportunities from that first three. Just a simple little screen and an extra pass, and it's a great look for VanVleet. And then off the dribble, he took some good shots in the mid-range too. The ones I saw didn't fall, but they were good shots. And I want to see an extra effort in terms of gating extra possessions. That's what I felt like the Rockets left off most in that game. It's just preseason game number 1, but I'd like to see that tenacity, that extra second and third effort to keep the ball alive and create extra possessions.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on VanVleet, both ends of the court. It's like having an adult in the room. It's like we're at the bouncy house the last couple of years, and it's like, who's watching these kids? And Fred VanVleet shows up and he's like, hey, you go there, you go there. He puts guys in the right spot. He's in the right place. You see him battling on defense, as small as he is. He still, scraps for balls. It's one of his real benefits as a player is VanVleet gets steals. He gets his hand on balls. He gets deflections, all of those things that you're going to see that the Rockets' other players need to pick up on, not Tari Eason, because we know he knows how to do all that stuff, but the other guys can really do that. The other thing, Shaun, Jabari carried over what we saw from Summer League, the aggression, the confidence. It's on a whole other level than we saw all of last year. His ability to drive and draw free throws changes his entire ceiling, Shaun. This is a total difference. If Jabari Smith is not just a spot up shooter that we all thought, or not we all, some of us thought he was just going to be, but he's turned himself into somebody that can get to the free. If you get to the free throw line and get you a few extra points, all of a sudden 20 gets easy.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, he had the third highest plus minus, of any Rocket player the other night. I thought a really good, complete game. And you talk about the ability to get to the free throw line too. Just being in position and being tough up to the basket, to get to the free throw line in those instances. I thought it was huge. And the fact the Rockets, I think they nailed almost 73% of their free throws the other night, which I was, silently impressed with. And
I don't know. I think they weren't that good at like Jalen couldn't hit a free throw. Sengun was doing terrible. No, the free throw shooting was actually, that was one of the things that was a concern. Also, not shooting a lot of threes.
I think they were up around 73%. I know Jabari made all of his.
Yeah, I'll have to double check on that. But the other thing is, if people are, listening to this, we're recording during their second game. So that's why we're not talking about the game against the Pelicans. But I don't think I need to see much of the second game to know it just looks like a different team. And I can see where this thing is going. And the other part about it is Amen and Cam Whitmore look so good right now that you, again, as I mentioned, after Kevin Porter was gone, I said that's the best thing that could happen to the Rockets, because we're going to see more Amen and Cam Whitmore. We're not going to see a ton of them. It's not like they're all of a sudden going to be playing 35 minutes a game or something like that, but it gives us a real chance to see those two guys. And Cam's going to he's going to try to fight his way over Jayshawn Tate. And I know Tate's got the experience, and I'm sure Udoka is going to maybe rely on that experience, but that's one of the things that he talked about in Udoka. He said, look, there's no guarantee, Shaun. There's no guarantees with any, with Silas. Sometimes you just figured he would run out no matter what you did, no matter how bad you screwed up. You were playing so many minutes a night, and that was it.
It's accountability. That was maybe first and foremost what this team, this organization needed. And you kind of knew immediately that you were that's what you were getting in the package that you were getting with Ime Udoka. Accountability for these young players. It was probably 1 and 1A, to be honest with you, and much needed. It's one game, but 21 and 17 minutes respectively for Thompson and Whitmore the other night. Whitmore, the highest plus minus out of any Rocket player, plus 21. Awesome. I could totally see those guys getting 20 to 25 minutes, somewhere in that range, probably on the lower end, closer to 20. But if they continue to play as well as they did the other night, my God, the sky's the limit. When you look at this team, and I felt this way last year, it's just they were so underserved from a coaching and just overall handling standpoint. I just thought they were talent rich and with a little direction, with a little accountability. This is a deep team, man. I don't know how many teams in the league really have this type of skill set, talent from top to bottom. And Thompson and Whitmore to Eason. They just showed it to you the other night, reminded you, because a lot of people that have been following this team for the last couple of 3 years, they know what they got. And you just needed somebody to help put the pieces together. And I think Udoka is off to a pretty solid start, albeit just one game in the preseason.
Yeah. The other thing is they picked up Reggie Bullock within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
He's a shooter. They needed shooting, and I get all that. But to me, I don't want Reggie Bullock messing with Amen Thompson minutes or having Cam Whitmore get a little bit of run. Now, if Cam Whitmore can't handle it from a defensive perspective, and that's where Ime Udoka is going to judge these guys, can Cam Whitmore handle it from a defense? And he's shown the ability, shown the willingness too to play defense. But that's the one thing. Reggie Bullock, though, I like getting him. Just be careful with him. Jeff Green, I don't think he's going to care if he doesn't play, and I think he plays. He's like break in case of emergency, but otherwise he's like he's like having the uncle on the sideline that's going to help everybody out. But like Reggie Bullock, yeah, I'm not big into like just because he's on the roster and he's a veteran and he could shoot, that it doesn't mean I want him out there a bunch.
No, I don't know if Bullock's necessarily going to fit this role, but to some degree, like you mentioned, Jeff Green, he feels kind of like the Case Keenum, for the Rockets. Like he's the veteran, he's the mature guy in the room, the leader in the locker room, the extra voice, if you will, that's going to try to facilitate to grow, NBA level leaders on this team. Try to find out who that is. I think that's the mission. I think you probably have a good idea even already if you're Jeff Green, who those guys could potentially be. Now it's just trying to facilitate that, trying to get them to expand and grow in that role. And it's not easy. Sometimes performance, it acts as a little bit of window dressing. And I'll just little Texan insert here. D'Amico Ryan's talking about CJ Stroud in that fashion the other day, in terms of how he's still trying to, talk to him about being more vocal. I mean, we've heard CJ Stroud and witnessed it every single week at the podium. The guy's more comfortable. Every single week, the guy's doing something different and more impressive in a game setting. Now, whether it be your Jabari Smith or your Jalen Green, your Alperen Sengun, whichever one of these young guys, like that's what we're going to be looking for now. Every game, growth in terms of maturity, both on and off the court, how you're handling yourself, how you're handling your team on the sideline during a timeout, how you're handling yourself, your team in a locker room. That's what we're going to be looking for. That's the mission to me, why Jeff Green was brought in. And maybe as an additive, why a guy like Reggie Bullock is brought in too. You may be able to use him a little bit more than you could the likes of a Jeff Green, but certainly it's to kind of scout, find, and nurture, those the leadership qualities already innately in some of these guys.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Sengun. I didn't say anything about him, but you talk about somebody that looks a lot better on defense, and the way they're using him on defense is a totally different 180 from what Silas was doing with him. But he just looks like he knows where to go and he knows what to do, and he cares about defense. And if you get Sengun to buy in, which I think he's a guy that would love to buy in. He loves playing back. It's obvious that guy loves it.
I think it was such a disservice, last year. We need to officially throw that crap away. Just kind of like we need to throw the past away with the Texans. Sengun, if you take anything away from his time as a Rocket so far, it's that dude loves basketball, man, and knows where he's supposed to be on a basketball court. And
if he doesn't know where to be, then he's fine. If you tell him where to be, just be a good coach.
And that's kind of what I'm getting to. He needed a leader, man, and he needed the motivation, and he needed to know that we want to win. Guys need that. Like the fact that organization now has turned the page and they're serious about what they want to accomplish as a team on the court night in and night out. And they're learning. It's a process, but it comes automatically with the guy with a resume like Ime Udoka and this coaching staff. Like there are demands in place. They're going to be held accountable. And Alperen, I feel like he's one of those guys that was just waiting to be coached, waiting for the hard stuff. And I think the guy's going to flourish in it.
If you need some Astros content, we're doing live Astros post games. Me and Sean, we're not going to talk about it right now because I want you to go back and listen to me and Steven yesterday after game 4, our live Astros post game. We're going to be back on Sunday. Another crazy Sunday with the Texans live post game after the Texans game. And then me and Steven come back later that night with the Astros and the Rangers. Oh my goodness. I-45 series. Can't wait for that. Should be a fun times 10 Sunday for Houston sports fans. Hopefully it won't be 2 losses like it was this past Sunday. Please. I don't need 2 more losses on a Sunday. But hey, Shaun, thanks so much for doing this. And I guess I'll see you in the next couple of days. We'll do it again.
You got it. It's going to be a lot of fun, man.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.